Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Richard Citrin joining us. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be joining you.
Yeah, I'm excited for this, Richard. So for those who don't know you, explain what you do.
So I am an organizational psychologist. My work is with Fortune 500, large companies, but I also do quite a bit of work with nonprofits. I enjoy my nonprofit work as well. And I'm a consultant. I do work around leadership development, team effectiveness, really doing things to make a difference in people's lives and to help businesses grow and achieve the success that they want to achieve.
Absolutely love it. Were you always interested in this area of work that you're now focusing in?
Well, yes and no, I think would be the answer to that. I'm a psychologist by training, and in the early part of my career, I was more of a clinician, bit of an entrepreneur. I owned one of the largest outpatient behavioral healthcare clinical and consulting firms in the Southwest when we lived in Fort Worth, Texas. Mm-hmm. And in addition to clinical work, we had about 25 clinicians on our team. We also had a number of organizational consultants, and we consulted with financial institutions, with airlines. American Airlines was one of our big clients, Alcon Laboratories, several banks in Texas as well. And so we did both this clinical work and consulting work. And in that regard, I was excited about it and enjoyed doing that. But at some point, we were able to sell our practice, which was very big in the 1990s when we were able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then I worked for several healthcare companies, and that was great because I was able to kind of cut my teeth on corporate work and see more of what happens on the inside of companies. And I found it very effective when I went back out on my own again as a consultant, because I now could speak from the fact that I had been a senior leader in several companies and understood both sides of the organizational consulting circumstance.
Definitely. Let's go back even further. So how did you initially get into setting up this practice where you were doing kind of both sounds like kind of the medical side, but also the consulting side? Were you always an entrepreneur, or how did you kind of get into that mode?
Yeah, I think I've always been an entrepreneur, and I consider myself to still be one. One of the things that, just take a sidebar for a moment from what you're saying, I think one of the critical factors that's essential for consultants is we have to keep reinventing ourselves. We have to come up with new ideas every week, every day, every year that's going to bring more value to our clients and to the clients that we hope to work with. So in that regard, entrepreneurship is a critical aspect of being a solo consultant working in this industry. But I think for me, it was really the case of saying, how could we deliver better healthcare for people? What you saw in healthcare really until the last 10 or 15 years has been solo practitioners, men and women working in their offices, whether it was primary care physicians or dentists or psychologists in my case. And just thought, there has to be a better way to do this. We can bring together the power of community. We can leverage resources and deliver better care and maybe even cheaper care. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We were able to deliver better care, but it cost more. Mm-hmm. That was primarily because managed care came in, and they're an intermediary in healthcare. And I could get started on my healthcare spiel, but I'll spare you that.
Right.
But they came in and they really redid the marketplace. And as a result, we found that we were struggling, and I didn't like that arrangement. So I was able to leverage my contacts and help convince an organization to purchase us. And that company was eventually purchased by Humana Healthcare. Mm-hmm. Right. So it turned out to be a great deal for everybody in the long run. And I loved it because it got me involved in new work. And I find I get bored if I keep doing the same thing over and over again. So that was a shift for us. And I think part of the question you had was how we got involved in some of the consulting work. And I think that was a little more happenstantial. Oftentimes we'd have clients who we were doing clinical work with, and they would say to me, hey, some of the things we're talking about, I think it could help our business. Mm-hmm. Would you be open to that? And I think it's the dream of every therapist and psychologist, certainly I should say the dream of everyone, but many of them, to work in the corporate setting, because it's such an exciting opportunity to impact organizations and individuals and large groups and fixed populations. And it certainly was for me. So we had some great experiences, and that really got me thinking about how much I wanted to do that kind of work.
Do you remember how you went about getting your first healthcare client, even before you started the consulting side within that initial business? How did you get the first healthcare client?
Michael, I was watching the video on your homepage this morning in preparation for our meeting, and your comment was one that I certainly adhere to and my mentor adheres to, which is that we're in the relationship business. Mm-hmm. We've got to build relationships with people. We've got to get ourselves to a place where we know people and they trust us and they build confidence with us and they know that we're going to give them the straight shot and give them the true recommendations that we need. So for me, it was always about relationships. When I was doing this healthcare work, I would call up the owners of hospitals, or I'd meet with psychiatrists, or I'd talk to these managed care companies, and I'd say, can I come over, take you out to lunch? Yeah, I'd like to just get acquainted and know more about your work. And, one of the things that I like to say as a psychologist, I'm much better as a listener than as a talker. In fact, sometimes I'll have people say to me, I really like what you have to say. Could you come in and pitch that idea to my boss? And I say to them, when I played Little League Baseball, I was never a pitcher. I was always a catcher. And by that, I mean, I didn't like the idea of pitching things. I'd much rather know what you're interested in, Michael, than trying to convince you that what I have for you is worthwhile and valuable. I can adapt my skills to what you need, but if I don't know what you need, then I'm not building a relationship with you, and you have a hard time building trust with me.
I think, Richard, what you just mentioned is so important about building those relationships. Yet a lot of people, when they hear this, they're going to think to themselves, or they're thinking right now, well, why would they want to meet with you? I mean, you're picking up the phone, you're calling, these are people that you don't know. How did you actually go about, and I'll use this word lightly, but convincing them? How did you get them to agree to meet with you? What was in it for them?
First of all, when I was doing this in healthcare, I was a customer of theirs or a potential customer of theirs. No matter who you're talking to, whether you're doing it as a consultant, whether you're doing it as a salesperson, whether you're doing it as a call center representative for a company, you have to demonstrate to people what value you're bringing to them, what's in it for them to talk to you. But the truth is, they have problems. They have issues that they have to deal with. And, if you genuinely believe that you're bringing some value to them and that you can help them, then go for it. And, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah. So you built up this organization. It was healthcare and some consulting. Later was acquired. It sounds like it was a fairly lucrative acquisition. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say it was lucrative all around. It wasn't retirement lucrative.
Okay.
But it was
feel good.
It was feel good. Yeah, definitely feel good.
Right. So then what spurred you to go kind of back and this time launch your consulting business, full focus on consulting?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It was, so I was 12 years in the corporate world, but I had two separate positions there. And to be perfectly honest with you, in 2009, I was laid off. My job was riffed. And it was interesting because I was at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I had a senior leadership role in the insurance services division. And the truth of it is, I had kind of done what I had come up there to do. I kind of achieved my objectives. And I think in fairness to the organization, in fairness to myself, I was a little bit not fully there. I mean, I was there, but, I wasn't being innovative. I wasn't coming up with new ideas. I was kind of riding the wave a little bit. 2008, 2009 was kind of a scary time for people. And I wound up being in the third rounds of RIF. I like to proudly say I was let go at the same time the chief nursing officer was.
Right.
So I was in good company. That was a little bit unnerving, but I've recently written a book on resilience, Michael, called The Resilience Advantage. And what I recognized is that, my track record is pretty damn good. And even though I'm feeling a little nervous about not being without a position, this is a great opportunity to consider what I want to do differently now. And what was obvious to me was that I wanted to be back out there by myself, on my own.
Yeah, and then at that point, what was it that you did to go about getting your first client?
Well, I did the same thing that we talked about. I started going out and reaching out to people who I knew, letting them know that I was going to be out on my own. Here's what I could do. I wasn't quite sure how to market that. I hadn't put a website together yet. I had somebody help me with some promotional materials. But in the end of the day, it was about my going out and meeting with people. And I would add that one of the strategies that I have found very successful is that I'm very involved in my community. I live in Pittsburgh, as I mentioned. I've been involved in a number of volunteer activities, everything from the Women's Center and Shelter to my Township Planning Commission. I was involved in a local organization called Leadership Pittsburgh, and these leadership, what city are you in, Michael?
I'm in Vancouver at the moment.
So there's probably a Leadership Vancouver. There are all these leadership programs, which are programs designed to help develop community leaders. And I was involved with that organization for a number of years as a program participant. But then when I was out on my own, I went to the program director and I said to her, this program is great for building community leaders, that is, folks to get involved with the community. But what if we did something where we helped them learn some of their own leadership skills, learn more about their own leadership skills? And I suggested to her that we set up a little 3-session executive coaching program where people could get a taste of executive coaching. I would work with them, do a little assessment, and just help them set some directions for themselves. Well, she loved the idea. And over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, I probably worked with 250 of the top leaders in Pittsburgh. And boy, that just skyrocketed my career. I had people calling me and wanting to meet with me, and I'd work with them for a couple of 3 months, and then they say, hey, can we continue this? Mm-hmm. So that use of volunteer work was very important.
And was that intentional when you were in the early days of deciding to get involved in all these different kind of volunteer organizations? Was it with the mindset of kind of develop these relationships to be able to grow my business, or did it happen more kind of organically and with less kind of planning behind it?
No, when I had been at UPMC at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, I was involved in communities. That's just always been an important value for me in my entire professional career. So that sense of giving back and contributing was important. I will say from a strategic point of view, I tended to work more at the board level than at the direct volunteer level. First of all, I had been a psychologist. I had done a lot of helping. I didn't feel like I really needed to do that, or that brought more joy to my life.
Right.
But working at the strategic level, at the board level, you got to meet more people. So that part was intentional, but it was all with the intent of giving back and genuinely caring about trying to make a better community here.
I find that just really interesting because you're following your values, but at the same time, you're opening yourself up to opportunities that otherwise you may have not encountered. A lot of consultants will not take that action. They'll just stay in the comfort of their own home or office or whatever it might be, and they'll spend a great deal of time building things, but they're not actually getting out into their communities or meeting with others who potentially could bring them business. Any suggestions from you in terms of how to go about doing that? If there's people listening that want to get more involved in their community, but do it in a strategic way or one that could actually have a real benefit for their business, what tips would you offer them?
A couple of things. First and foremost, discern what it is that you're passionate about in terms of a volunteer activity. Is it around, is there a family member who experienced a life-threatening disease? Mm-hmm. Is it, that your kids got a break by going to the Boys and Girls Club and they turned into terrific young people? Was it that your older parents benefited from the services of a hospice organization, or whatever it might be? I guess they wouldn't have benefited. Well, they could have benefited from the services of a hospice organization. Determine what it is that you believe in. Then I would use the relationship skills of calling up the executive director of that organization or the volunteer coordinator. Higher up, the better. So I would suggest as high up as you could get to see if you could have lunch with that person, or go on their website and see who the board members are and see if there's somebody on the list of board members who you know. Reach out to that person. And when you go, make sure that you don't talk about having them help you build your business, because it won't happen that way. I mean,
sure,
you better be on a board a couple of years and have made a significant or important contribution. That's how I got one of my biggest clients, actually, was a financial institution. And I served on the board of a small arts organization with someone who was the chief risk officer of one of our big banks here in town. And his wife and my wife were also in the same writers group together. My wife's a writer and author. Mm-hmm. And we got to know each other over the course of a couple of years. And one day after a retreat that we had, he said, let's go out to lunch. I'd like to know more about your work. And after that, he invited me to come to his company and start doing leadership work with them. And that was about 5 years ago. And I continue to do work with that organization. He's moved on, but I was able to build good relationships in the company. So that's worked out really well. So it's a long way to get there via pure volunteer work, but it's a great way to get connected to your organization. Go to the Heart Association dinner. Mm-hmm. You won't know anybody the first time you're there, but after you go to the Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and the Boys and Girls Club in your town, a few people will start to know you, and you'll find some areas of interest that are appealing and enjoyable to you.
It's a long-term play, but one that is not only rewarding, but also can really benefit your business as long as you have that long-term mindset, which certainly, Richard, you do. You've worked with many Fortune 500 organizations now. Your approach to winning business at that level, has it been any different? Was it just a matter of reaching out to people and setting meetings, or did you find a different approach to be effective in getting into those enterprise-sized businesses?
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early-stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Well, I think one of the things that's important to say I don't care where you are in your consulting business, and this is the work that you're in, Michael, which is helping consultants to be more successful. You have to find someone who you can work with, who you believe in, can help you grow your business. And I mentioned to you earlier before our call that I've worked with Alan Weiss for the past 8 years. And I'll tell you, when I went to see Alan the first time, and I'm sure it's the same thing for people who come to see you, I thought, well, he probably has some good ideas, but he just probably has it set up in a way that I hadn't thought of. And after my first half day with Alan at a conference, I said, man, I don't know anything. You just don't have your head around what it takes to be a successful consultant if you haven't worked with somebody who has kind of dedicated their life to that, knows what they're doing, and can deliver expertise. What I've learned in my training and my work with Alan, there's a lot of things, but certainly to your question, it's the idea of how do you deliver value? What is it that you're doing that's going to make a difference in that person's business? How are you going to help them to grow their revenues or to retain their employees or to have better productivity out of the people who are working there or whatever it is that they need to get from their business? How are you going to help them to achieve that? So as I said earlier, I often go in, and it's hard for me to do because I like to talk, but the more I shut up, the more I learn.
But how do you get in? Let's just start there. I mean, what's the approach that you have found most effective, Richard, for actually getting a seat at the table? Being able to sit down with a prospective buyer and listen and ask them questions.
Again, it's the relationship building. How do you start to build it? And I think, I talked about the volunteer work as one way of doing it. Mm-hmm. Another way of doing it is speaking. So I have a mental note in my head that whenever I speak to groups large or small, there's somebody in this audience who needs my help, who can benefit from my services. And I have a mindset that day there's going to be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people who are going to come up to me after the program and say, wow, that really resonated with me. That was great. I'd love to talk to you further. Can we get together? And that's a way of doing it. I write, so publishing blogs, writing in LinkedIn is a good way to build your intellectual property. I have a weekly email blast. I'd invite your listeners to tune into it. It's called Resilient Wednesday. They can't listen into it, but to sign up for it, they can sign up for my website, citrinconsulting.com, CITRIN consulting.com. And I have
we'll get all that info linked up as well for
okay, good.
On. So back to that. So you're publishing content both on your website and in other platforms. You're involved in volunteer work. You're leveraging your network to create connections and develop relationships. And you're speaking.
Yes.
Any other approaches or kind of tactics that you're using that you find are a significant contributor to the growth of your business?
Referrals. Asking for referrals.
And who do you ask referrals to?
Anybody and everybody. Certainly existing clients. First, I ask for referrals from existing clients within their business. Mm-hmm. So I might be working with somebody in one section of real estate, in a real estate group, and I say to them, is there anybody in your back office that could use some of my services? Mm-hmm. So I'll ask for those referrals. And of course, I ask for referrals from existing clients and friends. I had a friend of mine who just sent a client to me. I think I'm going to be, who works for the Institute for Supply Chain Management. I think I'm going to be doing a workshop for them in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
So asking friends and colleagues for referrals, that's a great way to grow your business. And it doesn't cost anything. People already know you do good work. So they're going to be more than happy to help you along the way.
I think a lot of people who are hearing this right now are saying to themselves, yeah, I know referrals work. Yet they're not actively asking for it. They're not going after, not being proactive around them. What do you think holds most people back from proactively getting more referrals?
Oh, I think it's a kind of a fear of rejection, that people are thinking they're going to be greedy or they're taking advantage of their friendship, or that they might say no, or they don't know anyone. Again, if you're concerned about misusing a referral, maybe it's the brother-in-law of your sister or a sister-in-law, and you don't want to appear to be taking advantage of Thanksgiving dinner because they work for a big company in your town and they are in a leadership role. You can just preface it by saying, listen, if I'm out of line here, I'm inappropriate, please let me know. But I know where you work. I know the kind of work you do. And I just was wondering if there's anybody in your business that you could refer me to who might give me some time to talk a little bit about what I do and how I might be able to, less around what I do, but see if I might be able to help them to improve the business. First they're going to say is, I'm a little uncomfortable doing that. And if that's the case, hey, listen, don't worry about it. Let's go have another piece of pie.
Yeah.
So you can always get out of that easily enough. And you just ask for permission if you're not sure. But the people generally don't take that position.
Can't agree more. It's what's going on in our own minds that most often is holding us back from getting greater results and seeing the success that we really desire. And that's a really beautiful and clear example of that. I think everyone listening to this, definitely go out, ask for referrals, be proactive. Don't just sit back and expect. There's two kinds of referrals. There's active and passive. Most people think of referrals as passive referrals where they just come to you. That's nice. There's a lot more that you can be getting and business that you can be generating, as Richard has shared, a very good example of that, right? Go out and ask people, everyone that you know and everyone that you've worked with and everyone that you've had some kind of connection to, because you never know who they might know that can put you in touch, and there's not really much downside.
As long as you don't abuse it.
Definitely.
So if somebody gives you a referral and it's worked out, send them a thank you note, letting them know that, hey, I appreciate the referral. It worked out beautifully. But you don't want to come to them 3 weeks later and say, hey, I heard there's somebody else in another department. Can you refer me to them? So, you might want to come back in 6 months or 9 months or a year later or whatever seems appropriate, but you don't want to take advantage of their good nature. That will burn them out. Do
you have an approach to manage that? I mean, how do you stay on top as you're building your network? There's obviously more and more people coming into that. How do you remind yourself who to reach out to and when to reach out to them? Any kind of process that you use?
One of the things that's great about being a solo practitioner is you can keep things simple. And I just keep a simple Excel spreadsheet.
Got it.
And I highlight people in yellow who are still active, people in red who I don't think are going to go anywhere, people in green who are good. If it's a reminder, if I talk to somebody and they say, call me in 6 months, I just put it in my Outlook calendar and I have a reminder in 6 months, but I've made a note in my spreadsheet and I can reference back to that.
Richard, if you were in a position where you needed to generate new business within 1 week, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Wow, that's a great question. Generate business in 1 week. I would sign up at Uber.
Okay. Well, no, we're talking consulting business.
Oh, consulting business.
Yeah. I don't mean just get a $20 an hour job.
Yeah.
If you were in a position where you need to go out for some reason and generate an extra $5, $10, $20, $50,000, whatever it might be, one new consulting client.
Right.
What would you do right now?
I would go to my best clients that I've had over the past 5 years, and I would reach out to them with some kind of new information, IP, something new I'm doing. And I would let them know about that, and I'd say, love to get together with you and talk more about this. When you go to your best clients, Michael, they're the ones who have seen the greatest value that you bring and know that not only do they believe that you can help them, but they also want to help you. I've got a couple of clients who I talk to maybe every 3 or 4 months, and I just check in with them. I mean, I worked with them 3 or 4 years ago, and I often tell them, once we've worked together, I'm always available to you. And many of them call me up, even if it's just I'll gladly go out for coffee with them, or we'll talk on the phone for a bit. And when I call them up, oftentimes they say, it occurs to me I've got somebody for you that I'd like you to work with, or this team isn't performing very well. I'm wondering if you could come in and help me do a little bit of an assessment. Then when you go to your best clients, they know the value you can bring, and that conversation oftentimes leads to good opportunities.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. I want to just change the conversation and the direction a little bit here, Richard. And on your website, and I think in your book too, you talk about the hardships that you've faced personally within your family. Are you okay if we just touch on this for a moment?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because my understanding is you've had 2 children that have passed away, and I can't even imagine how hard that would be. So I'm very sorry about that. But
thank you.
I want to ask you, why share this publicly? Because some people would try and hide that. They would maybe just hide from anything that comes into their life that's uncomfortable or hard in general. But it seems like you made a decision to approach it differently. And I'm very interested to hear your perspective on why.
Well, I think that's a difficult question at one level, a simple one at another. I think initially it wasn't something that I was anxious to share with people, mostly, Michael, because people are pretty overwhelmed when you tell them that. My wife and I kid around about the fact that when people ask us how many children we have to stop and think, well, do we say 1 or do we say 3? 1 we can explain easily. 3 becomes a little trickier.
Right.
And usually it winds up being 3, and, people are appropriately solicitous about that and are understanding. But we also know it's more difficult for people at this point to hear that than it is for us to acknowledge it. I think that for me, a couple of reasons, though, I would say. One is I'm very proud of our children. Ken, who passed in 1997 from AIDS, was courageous and brilliant in his life and how he lived his life. And our daughter, Corinne, who died 5 years later from breast cancer, was the most grounded, spiritual, religious, faith person I had ever met. And I'm so proud of them that I don't want to not have them in my life and feel like I'm talking about them. Yesterday was Corinne's birthday, and her son made a post on Facebook, and we all acknowledged that. And Sheila and I were telling stories about Corinne yesterday. So it's difficult, of course, to do that, but that level of sharing is also a part of who I am. And, being a consultant ultimately is about you sharing the truth that you know with people in a way that they can hear it. If I can't be disclosing like that and let people see my vulnerability, I can't really expect them, or not necessary for them to share their vulnerabilities with me. And so that's the power of self-disclosing kind of at both a professional and a personal level. I think the other part of it for me and for my wife as well is, a lot of our work is around resilience. My wife had wrote a book, a memoir, and her work is around grief and making grief more accessible to people and helping them to feel more comfortable in talking about it. And for me, this ability to resilience is to show all of us is we can have tragic events. We all have tragic events. Nobody hasn't experienced deaths in their family of one kind or another. So there's no scale of what's worse or easier for anybody. They all suck. But it's part of what we deal with. So it's really helping us to face up to those realities, some of which are greater and some of which are lesser in terms of the toll they take.
I really want to thank you for sharing that, Richard, because I think a lot of people, we all have vulnerabilities. We all have challenges of all different kinds. But it's interesting how in this world of business where so many of us are hiding behind computers and technology and just doing whatever we can not to actually get in front of people, but we break it all down. The business is about relationships, and how do you have a really meaningful conversation with someone? You're yourself, and you share things, and you open up, and you tell them things that otherwise maybe you wouldn't feel as comfortable by telling them. You're allowing them to come into your world a little bit. And that's why I was very interested to just hear your perspective on why you've chosen to do that, because I know many others don't, but could benefit personally probably and to some degree professionally as well by being more open. So thank you again for sharing that, Richard.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Michael. I think that one is not one that I would necessarily share out of the box with new clients or referrals. That's not unusual for people to find that out about me.
Right.
But in a consulting relationship, that's a little overwhelming for people to have to try to handle. It oftentimes comes up in conversations later on. Mm-hmm. When it's appropriate for me to share it, or they ask a question about my children and we know each other well enough to share it in that regard. But as I said earlier, we're cautious about who we say that to, only because we know it's difficult for other people to process. And so I don't want to make people too uncomfortable as well. But there are lots of other things you can share with people. Losing my job, for example, and that was pretty traumatic as well. Here I was 58 years old, and I'd been a successful professional my entire year, and now I got laid off. Wow, that was kind of freaking me out. But yet everybody goes through fears of, as a consultant, it's even worse. How's your business going so far? Have you gotten some new referrals? Have you got new business to cover your projections for March? If you haven't, you start to get nervous, and those things create anxiety. And I think as consultants, it's good for us to be able to share that. For you as a coach and mentor to other consultants, they want to be able to use you to share those real life concerns they have. It's not just about how to ask for referrals. It's also about how to answer my wife when she says how the revenue's coming this month. So I'm sure those are areas that you support your clients with as well.
100%. Mindset is such an important part of all this, and like it is in every business. And as many people listening to this will know, that was really the topic of my most recent book, The Elite Consulting Mind, that really just looks at that the biggest factor in success that I've observed, Richard, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is it's not just the strategy and the tactics that so many people will talk about, but it's really the mindset. We might instinctually know to do something, but are we doing it? And if not, what's holding us back from doing it? And so in the book, I share stories both from my experience of growing multiple consulting businesses, but also working with hundreds of consultants around the world in terms of what often comes up and how to overcome those things.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think we have to look at the challenges we have. And it's interesting, in my book, The Resilience Advantage, I talk a lot about mindset and how much the kind of negative mindset that we get into. My book focuses a lot around resilience as an alternative to our stress management model and how we think about dealing with stress in our lives. And mindset is a very big part of that. In fact, I was talking on a seminar a little bit earlier today to a group of health promotion specialists. I'm going to be speaking at their conference in San Diego later this month. And I talked about the power of mindset and how you can use little tools. One of the participants asked me, said she worked at a residential treatment center. How do you get the kids who are clients there to change their thinking a little bit, to have more resilient mindset? And one of the suggestions I made to her was to put signs up around the halls and in the buildings about how you want people to think. I told her that, in the movie Rudy, one of my favorite movies about the Notre Dame football team, there's the sign at the Notre Dame locker room that says, "Play like champions today," as they're running down the steps and they all hit the sign.
Yeah.
I keep signs around my office around things that are important to me to remind me about how to stop and think for a second around how I want to be. So, prior to talking to a client, I have a message on my desk. Remember to breathe. Ask them what their objectives are. Remember to ask about what the budget is. Remember to find out why this is important to them. Why do they want to talk to me today? I have these questions written down, and I use them to help remind myself about the kind of energy and mindset I want to have for this seminar. All the seminars, when I do radio shows, I write down in my Outlook, Michael, energy, energy, energy.
Right.
And when you do that behavior, it changes your mindset. Changing that behavior changes the chemistry in your brain. So you begin to create a more powerful presence for yourself.
Definitely. Well, Richard, this has been a very enjoyable conversation. I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing a bit of your story here with us. We're going to make sure that all of the show notes, the transcript, as well as links to Richard's site and his book and everything will be on the page. So you can go to consultingsuccess.com and just look up for Richard's podcast interview here that we're doing. We'll have all that linked up for you. Richard, thanks again for coming on.
Michael, thank you very much, and great talking with you, and look forward to maybe doing something in the future again.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.